Today on the show, strategy plus action equals how to train others to enable success. Great coaches and consultants like you have the ability to change people's lives and transform entire organizations. And your impact can often go far beyond the clients you work with. One of the reasons I love working with coaches and consultants is because of that ripple effect. This show is here to highlight your expertise and empower you with resources and new ideas to grow your business. Welcome to Strategy in Action. Welcome to episode 54 of Strategy in Action. Today's part 3 of our conversation with Anshar Seraphim. It has been a blast having this amazing, in-depth, giant conversation around all these topics with Anshar. And, I encourage you to really seriously, go check out, episodes 52 and 53, parts 1 and 2 of my conversation, because there's a lot of context there that we're bringing together in part 3 here. There's a lot of education that went into part 1 and part 2 that Anshar really brings together in today's episode and makes it very applicable to now go train someone else to learn better, all of these things. All right, let's jump in. Welcome to Strategy in Action. Anshar, welcome back.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Yes, this is a blast. Part 3, if you haven't watched part 1 or 2, stop this right now. Go do that. I know you hear that from people, but seriously, we're definitely continuing on here in this amazing topic of these incredible human skills, mental skills, the awareness of yourself and others, and picking up from where we left off in part 2, bringing all of this together. I'm gonna hand the reins over to you right away because you're on just such a great role with that, and dig in and guide us into what we're going to do with all of this now. Just like, great, I'm bought in. Now what do I do with all of this?
All right. So once we know our own personality type, our own perspective, what cognitive beliefs we or the prospect have that might be impeding the process, what's in it for us, then we have to be able to approach giving other people information in a way that they can process. We touched on communication, making sure that we're at the right pace and focus with them, being able to listen in, and get that peer dynamic going. So there's a really, really great process for teaching people. And I talked about self-management. That can be one of the weakest things, especially if you're doing consulting or you're trying to teach someone a new skill, or why even it's important for them. And we talked about the performance pie. So feedback, conditions, knowledge, measurement, incentive, expectations, creating a system so that you can recognize why execution is not happening and then target your efforts to fix that. And so when we're training, whether you're learning something for yourself, you're trying to transmit ideas to another person, or you're training your subordinates to be able to be capable and competent so that you can delegate important things to them and trust that the execution is going to be done. I think one of the biggest impediments for solopreneurs and people in their own business is that they always believe that they personally have to do certain steps, and that makes it really difficult for them for time management, because they have not learned how to effectively train other people and be able to generate results with that, so that they can 100% trust if they buy a virtual assistant on Fiverr or Upwork or something like that, that they can delegate important tasks to that person and be able to have the faith in them that they're going to execute. But it also affects client results too. So reduction to the ridiculous, we're going to talk about making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, because I think that this is an easy example all of us can get on board with. And we talked about the different kinds of way that people learn. So we want to design an approach that covers all of our bases at once and enables success. So now they're in the right mindset to hear the information. So first we introduce the topic that we're going to teach so they know what it is that they're about to learn. That mentally puts them into the framework of wanting the skill and what the end result is going to look like. Part of that introduction should be why that skill is important. What's in it for them? So today I'm going to teach you how to make a really high quality peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And this is a really important skill to have, because if you have guests who drop by completely unannounced, you'll have something that you can make that is simple, that people almost associate with almost like a kid's food, but you have the ability to dress it up in such a way that you can make people feel like you're actually, taking care of them and catering them and giving them a good experience, even though you're only spending a few bucks on making them. It's also a really easy way to take care of your nutrition requirements. If you got low blood sugar, it's a very fast meal that you can prepare, and the ingredients don't tend to spoil. There's even versions of these ingredients that are like ultra pasteurized and stuff, and you can make it on the go or make it on the fly if you have like a backup fridge in your office or something like that. So it can be a really important thing to do. So we introduce first, then we're going to demonstrate. Okay, so these are the tools that I need. This is the stuff that I'm working with. This is the bread. This is what I'm looking for in the bread. This is what I'm looking for in tools to make sure I have the right ones. And I'm going to actually show them the process that I go through to make a good peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I might, show them that I'm going to take a really sharp knife and cut off the crust if I'm making like a party dish to serve at a party. I might talk about, whatever it is that the intended goal is. So we introduce, we demonstrate, and then immediately after, we have that person practice the skill in front of us so that we can get feedback. Now, if you're doing this for yourself, right, you're getting bought in on why it's an important thing and why you want the skill. In essence, you're doing the introduction for yourself. And then you're seeking out people who are running you through all of the steps that you need to do. And then, again, practice. So whether you're doing this phase with someone else or you're doing it for yourself, you need to execute that skill, and then someone who is sapient on that skill needs to watch your execution and give you feedback. You did a really great job here. You took care of all the stuff. You didn't actually close up the peanut butter, the jelly, and the bread after you were done. It's an important step, otherwise it's stale for the next time. You did do this. You didn't do this. I like the way that you did this. When we do that, we want to positively frame, what went well, what could have gone better or differently. And we want to watch the person that we're training for signs that they have belief systems or problems with failure. And if we see those, we want to remind them that no person has a skill who has not gone through the process of trial and error to perfect that skill. And that what they are doing right now is an exciting step to learning what's missing from their existing execution so they can get the results that they want every single time that they make that peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So we have them practice. We have an observer. Well, that's us if we're doing it, with someone else, or we have to get someone else who's good at that thing to observe us. And then we provide feedback. And then when it's all done, we summarize. All right, so today, we learned about how to make a great peanut butter and jelly sandwich. We talked about why it's important. We talked about the different situations that it's important. We talked about tools. We talked about the process, about not putting too much peanut butter or too much jelly on the other side and how it can affect the taste, how your bread choice matters, whatever. And just bundle everything up. So this does a few things. One, we're engaging different parts of the brain. Vision's in the occipital, got the somatosensory cortex for our muscle memory. We've got the prefrontal cortex for being able to intellectually process the task. We've got the amygdala and the related emotional processes for how we feel during the different frustrations of this process so that we can be ready to continue executing. And then because the brain is an associative computer, we have given it enough experience and enough of a flashbulb memory that we'll be able to refer to this experience when we're going to execute again, and it will give us enough confidence to not be afraid to start that behavior going forward. And then once we've started that in motion, then we have to use those management skills, whether it's to manage ourselves or manage someone else. Are we consistently giving feedback on execution? Are we providing the right tools? Is there a gap in the knowledge or training? Has that person actually successfully executed that behavior in front of you when you were observing, right? Do they know how success is measured? How long should it take you to make the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches? How many should you make? How much materials should you be wasting all on? What's in it for you? And then how am I going to hold that person accountable? Well, I'm going to do a follow-up appointment with you in 3 weeks. I want you to practice 10 times. I want you to put those practice sessions on your calendar. And we're going to investigate each one of those times that you did it. And I want pictures, dated pictures of each one of those executions so that I can give you feedback on what those sandwiches look like. And we can take a look at where you got in the 3 weeks of that process. And then you actually got to follow up and you do it, hold them socially accountable, right? If you go through that entire process, you will immediately find out if you have a person who, one, can't do the task for some reason or other, and you'll know why. You'll know if there's a gap in execution, why it's happening, and which one of those elements of the performance pie you need to focus on. And you'll have an action and a strategy plan to be able to focus on whatever the gap is so that you can do things better or differently. And so let's apply that, right? Because today I'm showing you how to design a training program, and that's super important because if you want to get your own buy-in and be able to execute, you have to not only be able to do this for yourself, be able to do it for others. So now I'm going to demonstrate, right? Maybe I'm interested in understanding a new social media platform, right? So I'm going to make 10 posts and I'm going to show you the process that I go through with those posts. And I will show you, okay, this is how I identify which hashtags to use. This is a great way to link. This is a good URL shortener. This is good media content to put because it's got, facial expressions and engagement, micro expressions, people interacting, and you can tell what the post is about just by looking at it, and that drives enough interest for someone to look at it and want to interact with it and identify with it. I will run you through that entire process, right? I'll show you 10, and now, all right, now that you're armed with that information, with me here, let's design a post. I want you to go through the process once all on your own so you can show me what you've learned, and then we can take a look at your end result, and we can talk about what went well and what went differently. Perfect. Okay, we're going to do that 5 more times. Outstanding. Okay, so today, this is what we learned. Now here's the follow-up. I want you to do this many social media posts using this new rubric that we've done. I want you to make copies of them and take a look at the social engagement that you got and compare it to your existing results. And then when we go to do our follow-up appointment, I'm going to hold you accountable to that. And I'm going to have 4 other people in here who also are working on their social media skills so that you guys have the ability to discuss that process with one another. And if you guys end up having any common questions or common experiences, I'll be able to recognize that might be a gap in something that I'm bringing across. I can improve this process for you, and you'll have an opportunity to go through the process of designing a didactic approach for other people who are also learning the skill, which will make it so that you can transmit this skill to the next person that you hire. Since now this is a feather in your cap, you can properly delegate this to someone else, count on it being done right, and we can focus on the next thing that we're learning. That process has to be done correctly. And when we know a lot, when we're already in a place of sapience on something, we can forget that we have to go through those steps in order to be able to properly transmit the information. But even if a person's very intelligent and they understand the purpose, the process of going through execution, getting feedback, getting social proof, follow-up, that over that 21-day period creates positive habits that maybe they don't even know that their brain is programmed that way. And that way, as a coach, a consultant, or a manager, they will get to enjoy the fruit of that effort and that results because you have given them a process that's informed by that. And if you're a coach or consultant, that means that their results are your results. And if you failed to transmit that information or given them a rubric for applying it in a way that actually allows them to succeed, that's a reflection on you, not a reflection on them. So you have to take pride in that process, and we can take it for granted. And I see it all the time when I was working in sales. We'll skip parts of that process. Here, I'll show you it can be done, and then I'm just going to back off. Or I'm going to talk about the topic, but then I'm going to back off. I'm going to give you a bunch of information, but then I'm going to back off. You'll follow up with me in a week. And if you don't put all of those things together, you don't create a narrative that can be processed by the brain properly enough to be able to create a new system of behavior that person can rely on and build their confidence.
Yeah, that's such a great framework to designing a 6-week coaching program or a course. Like, your program overall follows that framework, but then each module, each week should follow that as a microcosm, right?
And we skip steps in that. And again, talking about personality type, we think about the way that we process information and what's important to us, but we have to design a process that hits all of those earmarks. And sometimes the skills that people are weakest at, it's the most important to transmit because at some point or other, they're going to have to be able to transmit the skill, the sapience, this confidence to another person if they're going to train someone as well, train a replacement or be on your team or be able to execute that and integrate it into their business. And if you don't create that process for others, but most importantly for yourself, then you will fail to establish the set of behaviors that makes that easy. If I can learn as an autistic person how to control the tone of my voice, how to be able to give, eye contact that isn't creepy, that I can learn how to use the micro expressions on my face to be able to transmit understanding and rapport to people. If I can be comfortable closing big numbers, if I can be comfortable teaching hundreds of sales associates when I didn't even have a friend until, that I could be around for more than a couple of hours a day until I was in my 20s, you can do this. But you have to create the framework. You can't just say, well, what's different about this person? Because really, the truth is that we are only going to naturally put changes into our lives when we have to grow. If you move to Spain, if you're interested and invested in learning the Spanish language, then you're going to do it because you're going to have that gap and you're going to need it. But technically, Spanish isn't a language; it's Castilian, but a different thing. So it's important to challenge yourself. Make sure that you put yourself into an environment for success. But then when you're doing that for other people, they won't always recognize the relevance or the importance of that. They won't understand how dopamine works. They won't understand their own cognitive belief structures that are creating the resistance to them executing. I used to be a college tutor, teach people calculus and, astronomy. And, if people feel overwhelmed by that topic because they have a belief system that they're bad at it, sometimes you have to reframe their language. And go, I'm really weak at this. I'm really bad at that. No. That's an area of opportunity for you. And this is why you want it. This is what you're going to do to get it. And this is the benefit that you're going to get in your life from doing it. Question is are you willing to put in the work to get to that finish line if you have help? And if the answer is yes, well, I just closed the sale.
Yeah. So with that framework that you laid out for us in the beginning of teaching someone and guiding in demonstration, and now they do it back, does that cover the bases of multiple learning styles, multiple, personalities? Is that
visual,
kind of all
kinesthetic, auditory, but then also most importantly, didactic? If a person has to recombine information that they have gotten through their own process in order to be able to get another person to understand it, that is when you truly know if you have learned something, because you cannot teach another person and break down what you know to be able to transmit it to them in a way that can allow them to succeed without actually being completely familiar. And that process, that desire, our framework sometimes can make it easier for us to do things for other people than to do it for ourselves. And we talked about the dopamine detox. That can be one of the things that causes that, is that we get that anhedonia and things don't give us pleasure, but we're still able to get the social pleasure from doing it for someone else. So you're engaging, again, a different part of your brain, and you're giving yourself that primacy. You're also giving yourself a flashbulb memory of teaching someone and them being happy and excited about that information because they got it because of you. And it can be easier to recognize the accomplishments of other people than your own. But if you were the reason that they got that accomplishment in the first place because they followed your process, again, it can help you cognitively reframe, get rid of some of those belief systems and stuff because you helped someone else get to the finish line too.
Oh, yeah. And instantly, then there's you establish a new identity with yourself as someone who, if I've taught somebody this, I must be some level of expert, knowledgeable, something. And like in an instant, There's
It'll
a new
kill
identity.
imposter syndrome for sure. Because if you transmitted an entire skill from scratch to someone and then they went and executed it and were successful, obviously, if that happens enough times at least, because at least the first couple of times our imposter syndrome will creep in and be like, oh, it was accidental, or I can't believe I got credit for that because I just got lucky or whatever. But once you start to see a pattern of results that are based on your direct behavior and your investment in other people, especially, it will help you reframe and get out of that place in your head where you assume that it's just a little bit of luck, and maybe if people knew the truth, they wouldn't be thinking of you as an expert.
Yeah, and again, it can happen so fast. It can happen. You can learn a skill and the next day turn around and teach 3 people, and you can go through that process really fast.
And sometimes it's because of the criticism you get too. Like, I've been working on my interpersonal skills for 20 years. There are times that I will have people who are, parents or siblings of people who are autistic or people who have Asperger's, and they'll come up to me and they'll be like, you don't have autism. And in one way you can be insulted, but think about the fact that you've been working on those skills so much and that person just doesn't understand your story. And it's like, thank you for saying that. It's very nice that you think that after all of the work and stuff that I've put in, that you don't really associate that with me. That was one of the goals, the challenges I had. But this is one of the things that I learned. Sometimes trying to pretend to be something that you're not can be more destructive, and so you have to balance that and get positivity. And then maybe you share some of your journey with them and give them a different perspective. But the criticism can sometimes, sometimes be really helpful. And I think that we have a tendency to be adversarial with people, to identify, enemies or haters or whatever it is that our social formula dictates. And I think that people are, more often treacherous through weakness than calculation. The only reason that they're saying those things to you, the reason person's making fun of me, for doing my Rubik's Cube or whatever, is because it made them feel uncomfortable and they have to have their own authentic reaction to that. It's not about you, it's about them. And if you can step out of yourself, and it can be really important in negotiation too, because one of the emotional triggers is character maintenance. We can get into that in a later episode. But they're worried about being positively or negatively socially evaluated based on the amount of money that they're spending. And in a market bazaar economy, let's say a person's from like Bahrain or something like that, or places in China where they have to go and they have to haggle, the amount of money that they spent on something and whether or not they have an in with somebody and get a better deal or talk someone down or make them feel like they're over a barrel, that ties into their self-esteem. So much like a person, bartering in a market bazaar, it might be like, I don't know, that pot's got a kind of a funny shape to it. Looks like there's a chip on the bottom of it. They'll start denigrating your product or service, and they're just doing it so that they can feel confident in their purchase. And if you have a negative response to that and take it personally just because you have a different cultural framework, you just walked a person who was showing you a buying signal. So that's hard. And this is also one of those negative things about selling yourself is if you think that you're selling yourself and not selling your service, then you can take some of those criticisms or those comments personally and then have an ego reaction to it, to a buying signal. And then you'll be angry at a person for telling you they're ready to buy. If I wear a Rolex and I talk to some guy in Pennsylvania, he might be like, man, that's a great Rolex. Where'd you get it? I talked to someone from Saudi Arabia. He might be like, that's a nice Rolex. How much did you pay for it? Because he wants to socially evaluate me for whether or not I can get a good deal and see whether or not I'm closer or further away in his peer group. He's reaching out to me. And because he's doing that, if I get my own ego in it, that's a problem. And you see it with spacing too. When you're dealing with in-person physical reactions, if a person grows up in an urban environment, their bubble of how close they are to someone else is very different from someone who grows up in a rural environment. I mean, it's a simple example, but like a handshake, you get a person who grew up in a really rural area, population 2,000 or something like that, they'll lean all the way into your space to give you a handshake and then go all the way back into their space. And when they have a conversation with you, it'll be from 15 feet away. Whereas you talk to someone who grew up in a high population density area, New York, Japan, whatever, they'll step into your space to give you a handshake. And one of the body language experts, really great books. This is one of those fundamental ones. Is Understanding Body Language by Barbara and Alan Peace. This is one of those older books. And there's a bunch of new ones too. Devarro and all of that. But that one of the cool things they teach you in that book is that when people don't understand the context of those systems, then they will have their own cultural reaction to things as if it was done in the context of their culture. And that's a terrible mistake when you're interacting with people. He talked about in that book about watching on video a Texas oil magnate who came from a rural area and like a Japanese businessman. And he watched the video of the conference, and it was like them doing a dance. The Japanese guy would go in to talk to the Texan, and then he would back up. And then they just did that on time delay. And they were just waltzing around the entire room because they were both trying to connect, but not understanding that they were doing it in a way that invalidated the other person. And when you start to step out of your own narrative and try to look to the reactions of other people, look at the end desired result, because the end desired result of communicating is to be understood. That has a lot less to do with you and a lot more to do with them. And when you can divorce yourself from that process and start to listen to the feedback of the people that you're trying to teach, to motivate, to inspire, I think that changes your process too. And it gets you out of that mistake in your head where you're selling yourself.
Powerful. Thank you so much for this. I could talk about this all week long. I love it. I love it so much. And more than that, I know for a fact that this is so incredibly valuable in so many areas of all of our lives, from personal to business, everything in between. So I really appreciate you being on and doing this. How can folks reach out and connect?
So I'll give you a copy of my electronic business card. It has some of my interviews and content and stuff on it. And that way you can share. If someone's just interested in a general inquiry and you want to skip that step, you can write me at, it's just my first name and my last name, Anshar Seraphim, period in the middle, at gmail.com. And I can set up an exploratory call. And then for your viewers and your listeners, we did a few episodes here. If we end up having a little bit of a break and you want to get some feedback from your audience, because now that we've talked about that, I've got about probably 400 plus hours of negotiation training for high stakes negotiation. I can touch on body language, micro expressions, peer groups. I can talk about neuroscience and how that affects your business. Everything from the psychological and emotional impressions that we get from color and what kinds of reactions those change in the brain, to how to be able to affect the memory system of your marketing audience and be able to make your brand more memorable. We can talk about written communication, how to deal with emails, messages, DMs, all that kind of thing, what the right steps are to actually turn those things into actual sales leads, and how to respond to objections and hit closing statements. So sales is an entire thing I can talk about. I've designed selling systems for multiple different industries, so that's something that I can do. I can talk about neuromarketing, why neuromarketing is important. I can talk about customer avatars and psychology, how refining the people that you're talking to can change the way that you do your funnels, can change the way that you do your pitches, your presentations, overcome objections, social proof, the whole process. I can do that. We can touch on advertising and PR, the psychology of that. There's so many cool topics that I have been lucky enough to deep dive into as a result of my personal journey. So why don't we, if there's an opportunity, to give an opportunity for your audience to give some feedback. And if you would like to invite me back on and discuss more of those topics in depth, I would be more than happy to give you my time for that. And it was really nice getting the chance to interact with you, Jason.
Oh, likewise. I appreciate that, because I'll say right now, yes, that would be amazing. Every one of those topics would just be incredible. This is why, if you listen to episode 1, I started off with, yes, we could do 27 of these episodes and still have plenty to talk about. Again, I appreciate your time on this, and this has been so fun.
Yeah, if you're interested in how the power of applied behavioral psychology and cognitive neuroscience can help you do what you do in a completely different way, or help you transform yourself, I think that these topics are really worth exploring. It's worth doing your own research. And if you want someone to be a part of that process and to help hold you accountable and help put the behaviors and the steps in so that you can have a different perspective on how to better serve the people that you do, by all means contact me. And if you have some things that you want to hear covered, by all means let Jason know, because that gives you an opportunity as an audience to be able to talk about some of your pain points and challenges. And maybe we can even use some of them as practical examples so you can get some of that specific advice. Because sometimes getting to hear how something applies to your unique situation is the only way that it will drive action. So do yourself the favor of talking about why things are different in your industry and why you're worried about whether or not this is going to apply, because that might set an entire direction for some really great ideas to be able to share. And it could be the same thing if you write me an email. So thanks a lot.
Yes, fantastic. I love that idea. All right, we'll see you all next time. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of this show. If you want help creating authority building video content or even a client generating show of your own, go to MediaLeadsCo.com and let's connect. I'll talk to you soon on the next Strategy in Action.